Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am beyond excited to be joining the My Favorite Things team as a guest designer for the MFT and Friends November 2018 feature, and in today's video I will show you how to create a fun interactive card using the new My Favorite Things Boo Wheel dies and the Very Best Friend stamps. As a first step, I started working on the front panel. I cut some Bristol Smooth cardstock by Strathmore using the Blueprints 31 Dynamics by My Favorite Things and created a few masks on repositionable packaging labels for my images as well as for the moon. For the images, I picked stamps from the Very Best Friend stamp set, and for the moon, I used a circle die, which is part of the Boo Wheel set. The reason why I created my masks is that I want to have a one-layer scene on the front of my card. So what I'm doing here is I am using the masks to help me position the stamps exactly where I need them to be, and then I can go ahead, pick them up with the lid of my Misty, ink them up with the My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink, and stamp them on my panel. I am then going to take the masks that I created for these images and apply them directly on top so that I can protect those areas as I go ahead and do the rest of the stamping. The next image that I will be stamping is the ice float where the bear is sitting. I'm going to stamp it and I'm going to mask that image as well. And then finally I can stamp the last ice float, which is the one where the bucket of fish is laying. I masked this last image too, and on the top left of the panel I also have placed the mask for the moon, and at this point I can go ahead and start working on my background. For that I used Distress Oxides, which I blended with the Ranger blending brushes and My Favorite Things Drifts and Hues stencil. I wanted to create the look of calm water waves, and this is why I chose this stencil over the My Favorite Things Make Waves stencil, but either of them will work great for this kind of background. For the water, I started by blending some tumbled glass Distress Oxide, first over the stencil and then on the lower edge of my panel. And then I came in with Salty Ocean Distress Oxide over those same areas to deepen the color a little bit. For the sky, I started by blending some Cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide in the area just above the water. I covered about 1/4 of the area for the sky with the Cracked Pistachio, and then I switched to Peacock Feathers, blending that halfway through my sky. Where the two shades meet, I went back and forth with my brushes, working the colors in those areas until I got a smooth gradient. And this is fairly easy to do when you use Distress Oxides on Bristol Smooth cardstock, and even more when you use these blending brushes, as they produce a very soft look, which makes it easier to blend the colors together. After I was done blending the Peacock Feathers and the Cracked Pistachio together, I started adding my Mermaid Lagoon. And as a final color, I picked the Blueprint Sketch, so that as I blend my way upwards through my sky, my colors get progressively darker and more blue. And I think that this makes up for a very interesting looking sky. In order to add some stars and some shimmer to my background, I used Ranger Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl. I diluted them with water and then I picked up the solution with a small paintbrush and flicked the paintbrush over the background. And as you can see, I am using the stencil to protect the water so that I don't get any droplets there. And then it was time for that very fun moment when you can finally peel off your masks to reveal the scene underneath. The effect is always so cool and this never gets old. The next step is to color the images, and for that I used my Z-Clean Color Rio brush markers. I started from the bear, for which I used light gray. I laid down the color where I thought the shadows would be, and then I blended it out with my water brush. Because we have the moon on the top left of the panel, the shadow areas will fall on the bottom right portions of the images. And there will also be a shadow cast by the bear's arm on its belly, one cast by the scarf, and also the area just above its leg will be a little bit darker because it's further away from the viewer with respect to the leg. For the scarf, I used geranium red and carmine red. I again laid them down according to the light source in this scene, which is the moon, and then I blended them out with the water brush. For the ice floats, I used shadow mauve and I laid it down under the bear because the bear would cast a shadow on the ice float, and also in the areas where the edge of the floats curves inward. I blended out the color with a water brush, and then I deepened the shadows by coming in with my English lavender marker and blended that out as well. I then decided that I wanted to deepen the shadows on the bear a little bit more, so I took my gray and light gray markers and I used the tip-to-tip technique. So basically I am picking up the darker color using my lighter marker, and then I am using that intermediate shade to add depth to my shadows. And then I'm coming in with a water brush to blend everything out and get a smooth result. I did the same for the bear's head, and then I quickly colored in the fish with the blue-gray marker as well as the bucket with the gray marker. Because the moon felt a little bit flat as it was at this point, I decided to come in with a warm gray marker and to add some dimension and some details. And then off camera I added some sparkle to the moon and to the ice floats by coating them with my Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen. At this point, I could go ahead and start creating all the elements for my Peekaboo wheel card. I first die cut the wheel out of some Bristol Smooth cardstock, and then I took this small oval die, which is part of the same set, and I used it to cut an opening in the main panel. I then used this die over here, which is also included in the Peekaboo Wheel die set, to create a notch in my front panel, and this will make it easier for the recipient to turn the wheel. And then I also used a teeny tiny die in the same die set to die cut two small circles just below the oval opening, so that the whole thing will look like a thought bubble. And you will see later on what the bear is thinking about. In today's card, the Peekaboo wheel will be rotating on an A2 panel that I cut out of some Bristol Smooth cardstock, and what will allow the wheel to rotate is a brad that will go through the wheel and the background panel. What I need to do now is to figure out the exact position for my wheel so that I can pierce a hole in the background panel exactly where it needs to be. As you can see, I used the front panel to help me position the wheel. I then used some washi tape to temporarily secure the wheel to this A2 background panel and used a pen to mark where I need to pierce the hole. I then used my scissors to actually pierce the hole and the back of my pick-me-up tool to broaden it a little bit. The next step is to stamp the images on the wheel. But before that, I want to create some guides that will help me figure out exactly where to do my stamping. So for that purpose, I am very lightly drawing with a pencil two perpendicular lines that run across the center of the wheel. I have already secured the wheel to the base with a mini brad, but if you do this after having drawn the lines, the job will be a little bit more comfortable, but I made it work anyway. I then temporarily adhered the front panel to the background with some washi tape, and once I have that secured where I want it to be, I will start rotating the wheel until I meet the first guideline. I will center the guideline with respect to the opening on my card front and lightly trace the shape of the opening on the wheel. I will then spin the wheel again and stop when I meet the next line. I will center it once more with respect to the opening and trace the opening on the wheel. I will be repeating the step 4 times in total, being careful not to use too heavy of a hand with my pencil because I want to be able to erase these lines later on. And once I am done with this step, I can go ahead and actually stamp the images on my wheel. For the first one, I still used the front panel as a guide in addition to the lines that I had drawn on the wheel, but this was just a precaution and it's not really a necessary step. If you feel confident enough, you can just go ahead and stamp directly on the wheel. The first image that I stamped was the fish bucket. I then rotated my wheel by 90 degrees, positioned the next stamp following the guides that I had created, and then did some masking because I want to stamp just one of the 3 fishes on this stamp. So I inked up the stamp, removed the mask, and then closed the lid of my MISTI to stamp the image. And unfortunately, at this stage, my camera stopped working, but here I am trying to show you what I did. So I basically just kept rotating the wheel by 90 degrees before positioning the next stamp in those oval areas that we marked with the pencil, and then I could stamp the next image. And I also colored them with my Z-Clean Color Real brush markers. I then took my A2 base again, and in order to tie it in with the scarf on the bear, I decided to do some ink blending with Distress Oxide in Festive Berries, and I am using a brush to apply it over all 4 edges of the panel. And then I added some water droplets in order to create some interest and to break up that solid red a little bit. At this point, everything is ready and I can start assembling my interactive card. I coated the backs of both my panels with 1 layer of foam tape, making sure to leave enough space for the wheel behind the front panel and also a little bit of space around the hole in the background panel. This way, neither the wheel nor the back of the brad will get caught in the foam tape and the wheel will be able to spin freely. I used a mini brad to attach the wheel to this A2 base, and I made sure not to tighten it too much so that I could still very easily rotate the wheel. And after that, I could go ahead and adhere the front panel to the base so that the main part of our card is done. Before moving on, I added some details with a white gel pen. I added some stars and some water ripples around the fishing hook. And after I was done filming, I also added more water ripples around the ice floats, and you will see them in the pictures that I will share on my blog. I heat embossed one of the sentiments from the Berry Best Friend stamp set with white embossing powder over a strip of black cardstock, and I adhere that to the front of the card. I mounted everything on a top folding A2 card base, and then, for a little extra touch, I decorated the inside of the card. I stamped one more bear with Distress Oxide in Ice Spruce and one more sentiment with Festive Berries Distress Oxide. And that finished off my card. And here you can see how fun this peekaboo die is. I definitely can't wait to create more cards with it. And before I go, I wanted to thank My Favorite Things for having me as a guest designer for this month's MFT and Friends feature. I am really grateful for this opportunity, and quite frankly, I am still pinching myself a little bit. So thank you, MFT, and you guys make sure to check out the November release because it's amazing. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can visit my blog for the full list of supplies, and I'll catch you guys soon with the next one. Ciao!